by rule 3A. Again, rule 3B is telling you to classify it based upon the essential character. Find out that particular commodity's most essential character. That will be the classification of that particular commodity. Now, the example of the shirt. Again, rule 3B saying find out what is the essential character. In this example of the shirt of cotton as well as woolen fabric, rule 3B will not help me out because I do not know what is the classification or what is the essential character of that particular shirt. So rule 3B is also not helping me in this scenario. Let's see if we are able to find out the HSN code for the shirt. Meanwhile, let us look at certain examples where rule 3B has helped us to find out a particular classification code. So you have before you the tower speakers. Recall the example of multifunction goods. Well, how will you classify that? Whether rule 3B will help you. Rule 3B is saying that find out of mixtures, composite goods made up of different components, made up of different materials. Find out which material or component is giving it the essential feature. That will be the classification. Now this tower speaker with additional facilities such as USB slot, a memory card slot, and an FM radio slot. It is also having two wireless mics, a Bluetooth connectivity. How will the classification of this multifunction goods be done? You find out which one is giving it the most essential character. So when the confusion is between 8518 or 8519. 8518 talking about loudspeakers, whether or not mounted in their enclosures, headphones and earphones, whether or not combined with a microphone, and sets consisting of a microphone and one or more loudspeakers, audio frequency electric amplifiers, electric sound amplifier sets, or under 8519, which talks about sound recording or reproducing apparatus. Now we can see the headings before us where the product could be classified, whether it will come under 8518 or 8519. So this was actually a case in the name of Sony India, where the tribunal was asked to decide the classification of this tower speaker available over here, which is having additional facilities of the USB slot, a memory card slot, and a FM radio. So the tribunal, by adopting the principles of Rule 3B, by saying that find out in the case of mixtures, composite goods, find out the material or component which is giving it the essential character. The classification by Rule 3B will be based upon that particular essential character. So it was held that the impugned goods are still speakers only with the added functions of a USB slot, a memory card slot, or an FM radio. And the main role of this item in question remains amplifying the sounds received from the outside source. The tribunal held that the product should be classified as speakers only. So the most essential character is given by the speakers. So by 3B, it was classified there. Now there can be a scenario where most of us are using these printers with additional functions. So you have a printer function, you have a fax option. It's a Xerox machine, that is, it can copy documents as well as it can scan documents. In these kind of complex products, though it might be as simple as available in each and every one of our offices, this classification, how will you do? What will be the essential character? Is it the printer? Is it the copier machine? Or is it the scan function available? So I leave it for you to decide how will you go about classifying this particular kind of a multi-function goods available. Here, it is very clearly being marketed as a tower speaker, and there was additional facilities of a USB slot and an FM. So the classification could be done as a tower speaker. But what about that printer plus scan plus fax plus copy? How will you classify such multifunction goods? Whether Rule 3B will help you, we need to check on that. So what will be the essential character? That is what Rule 3B is telling you to do the classification based on that. Another example, you have before you a leather case which is having an electric hair clipper, basically a hairdressing kit. made up of electric hair clippers, a comb, a pair of scissors, a brush, put up in a leather case. So goods, mixtures, composite goods put up in sets for retail sale. How will the classification be done for these kind of products? Rule 3b says go by the one which is giving it the essential character. So over here, the clippers, that is the electric hair clipper, is giving it the essential character because all the other products are used in support of this electric hair clippers. All the products which are put up in sets for retail sale are related to one another and to carry out a common function of hair cutting. So this hair dressing kit is getting the essential character from the electric hair clipper, and that is why the classification has to be done based upon the heading applicable to the electric hair clipper. Another example, I leave it to y'all to decide what will be the classification of this particular item before you. Is this a keychain with a toy, or is it a toy with a keychain? You know now, how will you go about doing, will the rule 3b will help you out. What is the essential character? Is it the keychain function, or is it the toy for which the end user is buying this product? How will you find out the classification of such kind of products? So sometimes as simple as a toy, you will not be able to do the classification without actually referring to the section notes, chapter notes, general explanatory notes. Even this rule, up to rule 3b, in fact, will not help you to do the classification because it is telling you to find out the essential character. Again, essential character is by the toy or by the keychain. That itself is a question mark. So rule 3b might not come to your rescue. So I leave it to you all to find out what you think will be the classification of such kind of products. So what rule 3b has been saying is going by the essential character. But when you are not able to determine what is the essential character of the product, then you see whether rule 3c can come to your rescue. I can think of some more examples where rule 3b could be used. A set consisting of drawing instruments, pencil, sharpener put up in a leather case, then that kind of a instrument also will be still considered as drawing instrument only. Floor tiles consisting of 13% PVC and 85% limestone with a plastic binder will still be classified as an article of stone or cement only because of the essential character. A combo pack of mosquito repellent refill and electrothermic apparatus has to be classified on the basis of what? Whether the electrothermic apparatus is giving it the essential character, or is it that liquid pesticide which is available which kills the mosquitoes that is giving it the essential character. So when you adopt the principles of rule 3b, it tells you that the essential character is given by the liquid pesticide available in that mosquito repellent available, and the electrothermic apparatus is just a medium for you to use that effectively by plugging it into that socket. So the essential character is given by the pesticide only, and thus those kind of products, the mosquito repellent refills with the electrothermic apparatus, has to be classified based on the essential character given by the pesticide available in that. Religious pictures of various deities on gold plated nickel foil framed in metallic, acrylic or wooden frame. So you have a picture of a religious deity put up in a frame. Say that frame is used out of gold material or a wooden frame. Still that frame or that picture is giving it the essential character. So it will be classified as a religious picture only and not an article of a wooden or an article of gold. So what gives it the essential character? Classification has to be based on that. So now recall the example of the shirt. Rule 3b will not help you out. So let's see if rule 3c will help us solve the confusion. Rule 3c says that when goods cannot be classified by reference to rule 3a or rule 3b, they shall be classified under the heading which occurs last in numerical order among those which equally merit consideration. So in our example of the shirt, we had known that both are equally important. Both the shirt could be classified as a woven shirt also, as well as a cotton shirt also. So this rule 3C is like a tiebreaker rule, which is telling you that you classify it according to the heading which is coming last in the numerical order. So this is not some arbitrary rule which is put into the by the World Customs Organization. It is telling you, it is not like when you have two headings, choose the one which is last and close the confusion on classification. There is some science behind such a rule also. Now recall what I had told you about 21 sections, 98 chapters, 1200 headings, 5000 subheadings. Now this arrangement in the HSN coding system is based on some science. We had seen section 1 dealing with live animals and section 17, 18 dealing with vehicles, aircraft and other associated transports. So this arrangement of the sections in my harmonized system of nomenclature is done based upon the products which are more naturally occurring, or rather it is in the increasing order of manufacturing which is required on those commodities. So more naturally available products are arranged in the beginning of that section. So like section 1 dealing with live animals, section 2, 3 dealing with fruits, vegetables, products of the milling industry, cereals. That is how it begins. Then you have prepared foodstuffs. Then you have articles of human hair, chemicals and other allied industries. Then vehicles, aircrafts. So it is an increasing order of manufacturing process required on those articles, and that is how the HSN has been arranged. This arrangement is followed not only at a section level, it is also followed at a chapter level. So when we read about section 4 dealing with prepared foodstuffs, 16, 17, 18, it was more naturally occurring products were available first. And if you see 19, 20, 21, it will be the more prepared kind of food products which will be classified. This arrangement is also available at the heading as well as the subheading level. So those 5000 subheadings which I have been discussing you about, it is also arranged in this increasing order of manufacturing process. When I look at the cotton chapter, the more naturally occurring cotton will have the first HSN code available. The first heading of that particular chapter will be dedicated to naturally available cotton. Then as I move through that cotton chapter, I will see that it will be ending up in the more synthetic available cotton, which will be classified towards the end. So depending upon the manufacturing process, there is some science based on this arrangement of HSN. In the increasing order of manufacturing process, it has been done. So it is not only a very universal language, which is the HSN, it is also a very, very scientific way of classifying these products. So rule 3C, which is a tiebreaker rule, or otherwise known as latter the better rule. That is the one which is coming last in the numerical order. That will be the classification for your product. So now for our example of the shirt, rule 3C finally is coming to our rescue to find out what will be the classification of this shirt. It is, you find out what is the code available to the cotton fabric shirt and the HSN code available to the woolen fabric shirt. Which one is coming last in the numerical order? That will be the classification for the shirt in the question which I have given. That is how this rule 3C is a tiebreaker rule, wherein it ultimately helps you to come down to a conclusion. So in this case of Mahindra and Mahindra, the confusion was whether 8703 should be the code or 8704. By principles of rule 3C, latter the better rule, it was classified as 8704 because both, though being equally applicable, it says you have to go by the one which is giving it which is coming last in the numerical order. Even if that is not helping you to find out how the classification should be done. So now example of the shirt which I gave you. Rule 3C came to our rescue and we were able to find out the classification. There can be certain scenarios where you do not have the rule 3C also is not coming to your rescue. That is when rule 4 will come into the picture. Rule 4 is known as the Akin rule, A-K-I-N, Akin rule. So it says that where you are not able to classify by any of those rules above, rule 1, 2A, 2B, 3A, 3B, 3C, then you go by the rule which you go by the classification of the good which is available in the market. That is a similarly available good in the market. You will do the classification based on that. Goods which cannot be classified in accordance with the above rules shall be classified under the heading appropriate to the goods to which they are most akin. Now, this rule has to be very carefully utilized, and it is not, in fact, it has not been followed by many of the courts also to use Rule 4 to come to a conclusion, because they are saying you find out the similarly available goods in the market. So if I have a product, I do not know what is the HSN code available. I will look around in the market. Where is this similar kind of product classified under? Either whether this product is similar to my goods or not. If it is so, then where that similarly available commodity is classified, I will classify my goods also based on that. This is what is known as the akin rule. It has to be used very carefully and as much as possible. In fact, in a practical scenario also, by the time you come to Rule 3C, you would have been able to come to a conclusion. Now, Rule 4, again, in the case of, say, new products available in the market, Rule 4 will not help you to find out because there is no such goods available in the market itself. There is no similarly available goods itself. So, Rule 4 has to be very carefully applied. So, when I was trying to find out any examples where Rule 4, any cases which has used the principles of Rule 4, I was not able to come to any such conclusion where I could give you an example of Rule 4. But there was one advanced ruling decision given wherein Rule 4 principles were used to find out the classification of a commodity. Now, this example is most common to your state of Kerala, where the applicant had filed an advanced ruling application to find out what is the classification of adai, which is used to make this dish of payasam. So we know this adai is, I'm sure you will have more knowledge than me. This adai is being used in this payasam, which is made out of rice flour, maida basically. And it is not, so this applicant was trying to classify and find out what is the HSN code of this adai. We know that in Kerala as such, it is known as adai. But if you see the northern parts of the country, this product is colloquially referred to as sevaya, or the English version known as vermicelli. So this is being manufactured in the kheer or being used to manufacture this kheer or the payasam. So this applicant was confused as to what should be the tax rate and what should be the HSN code of this adai which is being used. Whether it will be classifiable under HSN 1902, which talks about sevaya or vermicelli, which is having a 5% tax rate, or a residual entry under serial number 453 of notification 1/2007. So like I told you, we have to refer to the first schedule to Customs Tariff Act to find out the HSN code. So this particular applicant went to the first schedule to Customs Tariff Act, scanned through the millions of pages available over there, but it was not able to find out a classification for this product of adai. But it found out a similarly available good, which is sevaya vermicelli, and it is having a HSN code of 1902 available. So now it is confused whether it should classify it under 1902 because it is a similarly available good, or it should classify it as in the residual entry of 453. Now this residual entry of 453 is given in my notification 1/2017, wherein you had to 6 schedules of different tax rates. There is one particular tax entry which says that where your goods cannot be classified in the first schedule to Customs Tariff Act or any of the chapters, headings, subheadings, then you come to the serial number 453 and classify it over there, and it will have an average tax rate of 18%. So now this was a huge decision to be made by this applicant, whether it has to be classifying it as sevaya vermicelli or say that there is no HSN code available for it at all and classify it under the residual entry of 453. Now, this advanced ruling authorities had used the principles of Rule 4 to say that this product adai is being used in the sweet kheer or the payasam. It is similarly manufactured as sevaya vermicelli itself. It is just that the sevaya vermicelli is prepared in the form of sticks and adai is prepared in the form of thin pieces, making use of different dyes. That it was more like a square or a rectangular shape, right? Whereas the vermicelli was in a cylindrical, long cylindrical shape. So further on, it also said that in a dish where I'm using vermicelli, I'm most likely not to use adai. And if I'm using adai, it's most likely that I will not use sevaya. So these products have been equally substitutable for each other. So by rule 4, they have said that akin principles by saying that the classification of this adai has to be done as sevaya vermicelli under 1902, attracting 5% tax rate, and not under the residual entry of 453, attracting 18% tax rate. This is one of, again, a welcome decision where surprisingly the advanced ruling authorities have given out a decision giving a lower rate of tax of 5% and not the residual rate of 18%. So this is how akin rule, that is similarly available goods available in the market, you go ahead and classify based on that if there is no classification available for your product. So rule 1 to rule 4 is what you will apply sequentially. And by at least adopting rule 3C, like we said, is the tiebreaker rule, you should be able to come to a conclusion. Otherwise, rule 4, if carefully applied, maybe it will help you to sort out your conclusion. So by these 4 rules, you should be able to do your classification. Now, these 4 rules, again, I'm telling you, it is only given in your Customs Tariff Act. It is available in my World Customs Organization. It is going to be helpful only for deciding the classification in the case of goods only, not in the case of services. Now, Rule 5 is a different rule dealing with only in cases of packing materials. Rule 5 says that camera cases, musical instrument cases, gun cases, drawing instrument cases, necklace cases, and similar containers, specially shaped or fitted to contain a specific article or set of articles suitable for long-term use and presented with the articles for which they are intended shall be classified with such articles when of a kind normally sold therewith. This rule does not, however, apply to containers which give the whole its essential character. So now this rule is specifically discussing on how classification in the case of containers has to be done. If you look at the examples given in Rule 5A, talking about camera cases, musical instrument cases, drawing cases, gun cases, you know that these cases are going to be specially shaped to fit the main article inside it, to hold the article wobble free. So these cases, they are saying, if it is presented along with the article for which it is sold, then it is to be classified along with the main article itself. For example, a guitar case or a violin case. Maybe it is made up of, say, a nice teak wood is being used to manufacture that case of the guitar itself. Then I will not classify it as a separate product because it is going to be sold along with the guitar itself. Then I can classify it as the guitar case, as the HSN code available for the guitar only. That is, the case of the guitar will be classified as the HSN code applicable to guitar itself. The main point to be noted over here is it is to be specially shaped or fitted, it is to be suitable for long-term use, and it has to be presented along with the article for which they are intended. Only if these points are satisfied, then these cases will get classified along with the main article itself. Another example could be your spectacle cases. We know that again they are specially shaped or fitted, it is suitable for long-term use, and it is presented along with the article which is being sold. Then these cases will be classified along with the article for which it is being intended to use. Now, if I am a dealer of, say, spectacle cases alone, that is, I buy and sell spectacle cases, or maybe I manufacture spectacle cases and sell it to other retailers who are selling it along with the spectacles. Then in that scenario, this Rule 5 cannot come to my rescue because this article I am selling is only the case. I am not selling the spectacles. I am not selling the guitar. I am only selling and dealing with the cases of such kind of articles only. Then I will have to follow the principles or the classification applicable to the case itself. That is, what will be the HSN code for a guitar case? What will be the HSN code for the spectacle case? Whether it will be classified as articles of wood, articles of plastic, or articles of glass, that is where the classification will be done for such kind of cases, because the main condition is it has to be presented with the article for which they are intended. Then Rule 5B says that packing materials and packing containers presented with the goods therein shall be classified with the goods if they are of a kind normally used for packing such goods. However, this provision does not apply when such packing materials or packing containers are clearly suitable for repetitive use. So you have to go by the, if you are these other carton boxes or say styrofoam, so any of these extra packing materials which are being used, I will not classify it along with the main article. I'll have to find out whether the classification of that particular code for that carton boxes or styrofoam, and that is where the classification has to be done for those kind of products. That is what Rule 5 is telling. And Rule 6, like I told you, when you are doing the comparison, when you are confused between two HSN codes, you have to ensure that both the HSN codes are at the same level only. For legal purposes, the classification of goods in the subheadings of a heading shall be determined according to the terms of those subheadings and any related subheading notes, on the understanding that only subheadings at the same level are comparable. For the purpose of this rule, the relative sections and chapter notes also apply unless the context otherwise requires. So you have to ensure that both the headings are at the same level or both at the subheadings level, and all these 6 rules can be applied at a subheading level also. And the section notes and the chapter notes which are being prescribed, it is applicable not only at a heading level, it is also applicable at a subheading or a tariff item level. So this is what are the 6 rules which are used for you to help you to come to a conclusion on the classification of the goods available. So when you have, I'm sure you're going to have more than one HSN code where your product could be classified, and that is when these 6 rules will come to your rescue to find out what will be the ultimate code applicable. So though these 6 rules have been very elaborate, very extensive in their own, still there can be certain times when these 6 rules will not help you to come to a conclusion. So for that, we will be discussing about certain classification principles which have been evolved by courts based on the different litigations which has happened in the erstwhile regimes. There are certain theories which have been evolved by courts over a period of time. So not only these 6 rules have to be applied, even these classification principles have to be equally followed to find out what will be your classification. No discussion on classification will be complete without discussing on the trade or the common parlance theory. This trade common parlance theory, it has been regularly followed by the courts, wherein they have said that you cannot confuse an article on the scientific or the technical meaning of that particular article. A reference should be made to the popular meaning. That is, you have to see what the end user, what does the common man or the trader ultimately perceive that product as. That will be the classification. In Delhi Cloth and General Mills, it has been held that if there is one principle fairly well settled, it is that the words or expressions must be construed in the sense in which they are understood in the trade by the dealer or the consumer. It is they who are concerned with it, and it is the sense in which they understand it that constitutes the definitive index of the legislative intention when the statute was enacted. That is, ultimately, what is the popular meaning of that particular item? Classification has to be based on that. This classification principle has to be adopted in the absence of any statutory or technical definition available. So that is what is the trade common parlance theory. Let us see certain cases where trade common parlance theory was applied by the courts. Now, this is a very famous case of Commissioner of Central Excise versus Connaught Plaza Restaurant, 2012, by the Supreme Court. This was where the trade common parlance theory was adopted to find out what is the classification of the item before you, which was known as soft serve. Now, Connaught Plaza Restaurant was a franchisee of the McDonald's chains of restaurants based in Delhi. This particular restaurant, this franchisee of McDonald's, was of the view that the soft serve ice cream is a product distinct and separate from ice cream, since ice cream is commonly understood to have a milk fat content above 8%, whereas their product does not have more than 5%. So, what this particular franchisee, or you can say McDonald's itself, was trying to not pay central excise duty on this particular launch of new products was the ice cream line of products which was launched by them. They said that this soft serve ice cream, or the Maxwell that was known as it is a product which is distinct from ice cream, because if you look at the technical definition of ice cream, it is supposed to have a milk fat content above 8%. So McDonald's went ahead, brought about testing certificates and other opinions from technical experts, and told that this particular ice cream is not having milk fat content above 8%. Milk fat content is only 5%. So that is why it cannot be considered as an ice cream. It is a dairy produce. This was the argument put forth by McDonald's. Now, this was in the erstwhile central excise regime. So if you see in the erstwhile central excise regime, dairy produce was having nil rate of duty, whereas ice cream was having a higher incidence of central excise duty. So to have this kind, or to not to pay central excise duty on this product, they try to put forth this argument of saying this is not an ice cream because of the technical definitions of milk fat content above 8% and all that. So they had referred to the Food Adulteration Act also to find out all this. But the Supreme Court held that this kind of a technical definition will not be applicable. What is it is this term, this ice cream. So when a customer walks into a McDonald's restaurant, what it is looking to buy is only an ice cream. It is not looking at it as a dairy produce or having a milk fat content of 8% or not. So what matters is the way the consumer perceives the product. So this Supreme Court had held against McDonald's. The arguments of McDonald's was not considered, and this ice cream or this soft serve was classified as an ice cream only and not a dairy produce. So there was an excise duty which was ultimately levied against this Connaught Plaza restaurant by way of this order. So this is where trade parlance theory was used to say that what matters is the way the consumer perceives the product. Another case is of a Domex power cleaner. Now this manufacturer of Domex was confused as to the classification, whether it should be a cleaning agent under 3402 or as a disinfectant under 3808. This manufacturer of Domex power cleaner was treating this product as a disinfectant under 3808. They say that this product which we are manufacturing, the product which we are intending to sell, is only a disinfectant. It is not a cleaning agent in any case. But when the department came in for an audit, a show cause notice was issued classifying this product as a cleaning agent only and said that it should not be a disinfectant. When this case traveled up towards the courts held that. So this was a case where the marketing material of the particular item of this manufacturer went against that particular company itself. Because if you see the wrapper which was used around this Domex power cleaner, it had this logo of Domex, and below those, the words were used as also kills germs. This was like a tagline which was given along with the product. So the court held that when a manufacturer, when the end user, a normal consumer, the Aam Aadmi, when it is wanting to buy, it approaches to Domex as a cleaning agent only. When it picks up the Domex power cleaner bottle, it reads that it is also killing germs. That is, it is making this function of a disinfectant as a subsidiary function to the cleaning function of the liquid. So this product is to be classified as a cleaning agent only and not as a disinfectant. So this company came up with a lot of technical certificates, affidavits in support of its claim to say that it is a disinfectant only and not to be considered as a cleaning agent. But the court held that nothing doing. This product, based on how it is being marketed to the end consumer. The end consumer, when it's picking up this bottle, it perceives this product as a cleaning agent only. And so this function of a disinfectant is subsidiary. So this is something where the marketing strategy of the company had gone wrong and it went against the company. And though they were classifying it as a disinfectant, the court held that it is to be classified as a cleaning agent only. So, like I told you, it is very important for us to understand the entire manufacturing process of that particular product. Please peruse all types of brochures with relating to that product before which you are going to classify. How are they ultimately marketing the product? Where is this product even in fact being placed in the supermarkets? That is also an important role to find out how the end consumer is going to view those products. So this is what trade parlance common theory is telling you. What the end matters is how the trade perceives this product. Apart from this, you also have the end use functional test classification, wherein they are saying that how the product is ultimately going to be used. Classification can be done by that also. This again has to be very carefully used, just like what I told you about Rule 4. End use functional test classification does not, the nature of the product does not change based on its end use. Now, unless my section notes, chapter notes, general explanatory notes, or the description of goods given in the heading, they tell me that the classification has to be based on the end use. Till then, I will not be able to classify based on the end use functional test classification. For example, if I am a trader of electrical items, I sell switches, cable wires, and so on and so forth. Now, just because an automobile manufacturing company is coming to me to purchase these wires and the switches for use in the manufacture of an automobile, it does not change the character of my product. Because if it's ultimately going to be used in a vehicle company or by a vehicle manufacturing company, the cables, wires do not become parts. I do not become a trader of parts of a motor vehicle. So that is why end use functional test classification very carefully used. Unless my notes, section notes tell me that I need to do the classification based on the end use, I cannot follow the principles of the end use functional test classification. Importance of expert opinions. This again will help you to find out what is the nature of the product itself. Sometimes there can be certain very complex products which come up before you, wherein you are not able to determine what is the nature of the product itself, leave alone finding out where you're going to classify the product. So these expert opinions can be relied upon from the industry experts on that particular field. Say, for example, the pharmaceutical industry, where there can be certain complex medicines or chemicals which are there, which you don't know what is the nature of the product itself. So you can rely upon expert opinions and find out what is the nature of the item. Now, this expert opinion can only help you, can help guide you what is the nature of the product. It cannot do the classification for you. So you find out what is the nature from this expert opinion, look back into the first schedule of the Customs Tariff Act, see where these kind of similar products are classified, whether there is an HSN code available for these products, and then the classification will be done by this. In fact, the courts also, in many instances, have relied upon expert opinions for deciding what is the nature of the complex product before them for doing the classification. Finance Minister's speech, trade circulars, notices, and provisions at the relevant time. This will give you an insight into what is the mindset of the government when they're bringing about different changes in the tax rates. You know that when any change is being announced in the budget, there is a statement of reason which is given by the finance minister for why this change is being brought about. So this kind of this literature also will help you to find out what is the logic behind having this tax rate being changed. So all this will also assist you in finding out the classification. So these are the certain principles evolved by courts over the period of time to find out what will be the classification and how do you go about doing classification in the case of goods. Another example, if I would like to give you on trade parlance theory, the very famous case of the coconut hair oil launched by Marico Industries. It was known as the parachute coconut oil. We all know that this parachute coconut oil has been a subject matter of litigation even as on date. In fact, today, just before the session, I have checked whether this case has been decided yet or not. This has been coming right from 1996. This dispute is there. Whether the parachute coconut oil, whether it will be classified as a hair oil or it has to be classified as a cooking oil. If you have had a chance to look at this Parachute coconut oil, which was launched by Marico Industries, the blue color bottle. If you ever get a chance, I would like you to, after the session, maybe look at those bottles. And you will see that at the back of the bottle, there is a green color mark or green circle which is being put to indicate that this product is a vegetarian product. In fact, Marico Industries also has taken an FSSAI license to manufacture this coconut oil. It is telling that the product, the Parachute oil, is an cooking oil only, and it is not a hair oil. How the end consumer utilizes this Parachute oil is not their concern. They have been always marketing and selling it as a cooking oil only. In fact, this FSSAI license is also being available over there. They even went on to say that the marketing material, that is the advertisements which they are having on the television, there also nowhere it is being told that this cooking oil is to be used as a hair oil only, or it improves hair growth, or any such kind of benefits is not being marketed by Marico Industries. There, if you look at the advertisement, the TV commercials of this Parachute oil, it is always talking only about the strength and the purity of the cooking oil, because it never went into to say that it is a hair oil. So when the department came up to Marico Industries and issued show cause notices asking why this product should be classified as a cooking oil as claimed by the company, and not as a hair oil, which is ultimately being used by the trade. So these are the arguments which Marico Industries put forth the department by saying that it is not a hair oil at all. In fact, they launched a separate line of products known by the name of Parachute Advanced Hair Oil, that is advanced with an S. That is how it was being spelled. So they said that those products which is being sold is a hair oil, but the actual Parachute coconut oil which is being sold is not a hair oil. So the department said, fine, let us believe what Marico Industries is telling. So the question the department raised before Marico Industries is, if it is to be considered as a cooking oil as claimed by Marico Industries, please tell us why the dispensing of the hair oil, of the coconut oil is kept at, when you are using the coconut oil, only 1 or 2 drops would come out at a time. So if that is the case, if you're saying that it is to be used as a cooking oil, why is it being sold in such a manner where only very limited use of the quantity limited use of the hair oil can be done at a time? So the Marico Industries came forth and said that it is marketed in such a way because we want it to be used. It is to be used as only for certain bachelors or people who are living single, that to use it when they want to use very less quantities of the coconut oil. They also went on to, the department further questioned them that you are also marketing these products with 200 ml sachets. Please tell us who is going to use 200 ml sachets for cooking. How is this coconut oil in 200 ml sachets to be used for cooking, when we know that not only 200 ml sachets, we need more, sometimes more quantity is required to manufacture, to make food using this cooking oil. So Marico Industries again said that it is to be used for a one-time use, so people do not have to store these products. And again, for people who are bachelors who would like to use it for a one-time or say for travel purposes, this coconut oil is being sold in 200 ml sachets. This was the argument put forth by Marico Industries. So the department, like we know, always have this one power with them. They go ahead and change the law. So they went ahead and brought out a circular which says that if there is a coconut oil which is being sold in less than 200 ml sachets, it will be considered as hair oil. And if it is more than 200 ml sachets, it will be considered as cooking oil. So this led to a lot of writs being filed in all the courts, wherein ultimately the court struck down the circular and said that just because the quantity of the product being sold is in different, is changing because of say 200 ml sachets, so the quantity in which the product is being sold cannot be a determining factor for finding out the classification. And in fact, just because the quantities are lesser thing, it does not change the nature of the product itself. So this circular, in fact, was struck down by the courts. And so again, Marico Industries is back in the game, wherein they have to still find out whether the parachute oil which is being sold by them is a cooking oil or is it a hair oil. Much to the contrary, what it is being marketing it as a cooking oil only. But if you see the trade, it has always been perceiving it as a hair oil only. In fact, even in the High Court, even in the Supreme Court, the two judges were not able to come to a conclusion on this issue, and thus this case has been referred to the Honorable Chief Justice of India for taking a stand. The case is in the name of Madan Agro Industries, where the case is still pending whether the coconut oil sold by Marico Industries is to be classified as a cooking oil or as a hair oil. So these kind of classification disputes can run for years together. And just in case if it is going to be unfavorable to Marico Industries, they have to pay up the differential duty along with interest as well as penalty. So this is the issues of classification and how important it becomes for us to find out and guide our clients, educate our clients on the importance of this classification. If you know, in GST as such, the manufacturers and the service providers to a certain extent are not going to be that affected. But if you look at the traders who are always under the VAT regime, when they have to follow these new terms of HSN, per schedule to customs tariff act, it is a total different ball game for them. That is, GST is a total different ball game for them. So we have to understand that we need to educate our clients on the importance of classification. And the next time, whoever is going to get a call from your clients on asking you about the classification aspect, I'm sure you will never give away free advice and you will never jump to a conclusion, even if you know if your answer is right. I at least will be happy if you will brainstorm through all these tools of classification in your mind before you come to a conclusion on what will be the HSN code application. Most of the cases, when the tax rate is going to be the same, you are not going to face much of an issue if you're going to give away advice like this. But to find out whether the classification is at all the same itself or not, this whole exercise will have to be done to find out the correct rates. So I have dealt with in detail, but for classification of services, not that big a dispute, but I will not say that there are no issues over there. There are another set of disputes for classification in case of services also. But since more or less the tax rate is at 18%, that should not have an issue. In fact, I would like to bring about this case which I read upon, which is a subject matter of dispute in the European Court of Justice, wherein the classification in the case of Uber is under dispute. Now, whether the Uber, these taxi aggregators are to be classified as a transport company, or are they supposed to be classified as an electric commerce operator? That is what is the term used as an aggregator. So this was a dispute in the European Court of Justice because if you look at the transport, if it was to be classified as a transport service provider, then there was a lot of other regulations and a lot of other statutes which become applicable to Uber to function in the European Union itself as such. So this kind of disputes can come up. Even in the case of Airbnb, this issue was there, whether it is a real estate company or whether it is to be a hotel aggregator. So this kind of disputes can come up before the courts, especially in the case of classification of services also. Now, we have always been discussing upon the first schedule to the Customs Tariff Act. Now, this first schedule to Customs Tariff Act is always dealing only in the case of goods. It is aligned to HSN, which is a publication by the World Customs Organization. But when we come to classification of services, it is not referring to the Harmonized System of Nomenclature. It does not refer to the World Customs Organization. This classification of services, please recall the annexure attached to 11/2017. That annexure is based upon the United Nations Central Product Classification. That is nothing but the UNCPC. So just like the World Customs Organization brought about this HSN coding system in the case of goods, the United Nations has done a similar exercise in the case of goods as well as services. But India has not adopted the United Nations goods classification. It has adopted only the services portion of the to do the classification in India. So the UNCPC, so that annexure is based on the United Nations Central Product Classification. It has nothing to do with the World Customs Organization or the HSN. It is divided into 5 chapters like we discussed. section 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Dealing with broad groupings, again further divided into headings and sections. So this is what I have on classification. So to briefly summarize what we have seen is, first you need to determine whether it is goods or services. That first step has to be taken, or otherwise you refer to Schedule 2 if that is already done by the GST law for you. If not, you find out whether it is goods, find out whether it is services, then accordingly you decide whether you need to go to 1/2017 or you need to refer to 11/2017. Open that notification. Look at the tariff items and the descriptions of goods. Come to that explanation which said that you need to refer to the first schedule to Customs Tariff Act to find out the harmonized, the HSN code. So you leave 1/2017. Do not refer any further. Open your first schedule to Customs Tariff Act book. Find out where is the HSN, the code which could be applicable. Use the section notes, chapter notes, the 6 rules of interpretation. Find out a particular code. Borrow that code from the first schedule to Customs Tariff Act. Come back to the notification 1/2017. See where that code is classified in those tax rate schedules we had seen, 6 schedules which were applicable. See where that HSN code, under which tax rate it is classified. That is going to be the tax rate applicable to your commodity. And what we had seen was the tax rate notification under the central tax. You have similar notifications issued under the respective States Goods and Services Tax Act also. The state government also will bring out a similar notification. In fact, both the proportion is the same. So when we saw Schedule 1 dealing with 2.5% tax rate, the SGST notification is going to have the power to levy and collect the balance 2.5%, totaling to 5%, which will be the tax rate applicable in the case of intrastate supplies of goods. Similar tax rate notifications are available under the Integrated Goods and Services Tax Act also. So there are another notification dealing with interstate supplies of goods and services of goods. Now that IGST notification is going to have the total rate of 5% itself. It is not going to again further refer to. For IGST notifications, you do not have to refer corresponding SGST notifications. So what we saw was 1/2017 and 2/2017 dealing with CGST portion on intrastate supplies. For the SGST portion, you refer to the respective State Goods and Services Tax Act. There is not going to be a different tax rate prescribed by the State Goods and Tax. It is going to adopt whatever the central government says. And then you have for interstate supplies, you need to refer to the respective notification issued under the IGST Act, drawing power from Section 5, which is the charging section, whereas over here we saw Section 9 is the charging section for Central Goods and Services Tax Act. So you need to leave GST law, go to first schedule to Customs Tariff Act, borrow the HSN code, come back here, see where the classification, and that is the tax rate applicable in the case of goods. In the case of services, apart from this annexure which is there, you also have something called as an explanatory notes. Like we had seen explanatory notes in the case of goods also, you have explanatory notes in the case of services also. That again is a publication by the United Nations. But one drawback was this explanatory notes was brought out by the Indian government only in June 2018. That is, it was notified only in June 2018, which again provides certain meanings to the terms used in the UNCPC, which is the annexure, which I'm referring to 11/2007. So you find out what is goods, services, Schedule 2, Schedule 3, find out the HSN code available or find out the SAC code available with respect to the section note, chapter notes, explanatory notes, and that will be the HSN code applicable, and that will be the tax rate in turn applicable. So this is all I have for submission on my classification. I'm sure you will be more aware and you are more enlightened on what and how classification becomes very important. And we should all ensure that we undertake and guide our clients to constantly review what will be the classification of these products which they are dealing with. They might not be aware, but given the constant changes in the tax rate application, we have to ensure that we guide our clients in the right manner. So if there are any questions, I would like to take them up, but I will not be able to come and jump to a conclusion like I told you. I will straight away not give you advice that this is the HSN code applicable. I can only tell you how you can go about classifying, because without referring to section notes, chapter notes, or the explanatory notes, I will not be able to give a classification advice. And even if I do so, I will be contradicting whatever I've been saying so long to all of you. So over to the organizers. If there are any questions, I would like to take them up.
Madam, members are asking whether you will share this PPT or some details.
Sure, sir. I will email the PPT to the Ernakulam branch and they can forward it to the respective parts.
We will send it by mail, madam. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Jose, questions?
Yes. Yeah, there are a few questions in the chat box.
Okay, sir. So,
Yeah, one question.
could help me, sir, because there's a lot of other things.
Say one question is, if the question from Ishman Dandanala, the outdoor of the house made of iron prepared as per the specifications of the customer and fitted to the outer walls of the house. If this can be considered as supply of goods or services?
Under which classification it will cover?
Yes.
If the outdoor of the house made of iron, prepared as per the specifications of the customer and fitted to the outer walls of the house. I'm not getting a clarity as to what will be the kind of product which is being made. If it is being made according to the specifications of the client, and if the material as such is not being supplied by the client, then the question of it being a job work is ruled out. But it will be a supply of goods only, because that is what is the principal supply. Now you need to look at what is the definition of composite supply and the definition of principal supply. Composite supply, it has to be naturally bundled in the ordinary course of business. So if this outdoor, even if it is made to the specification of the client, of your customer, and it is being fitted outside, it will be treated as a classification of goods, and this installation charges, if it is being charged separately, will become and be treated as a composite supply. And this is my guidance. Mr. Venkatachalam, suppose my supplier has followed a wrong classification. What is the effect on me? Very good question, sir, because most likely we tend to follow the HSN code which is being received in our purchase invoices. We go by whatever is the classification. Now, had we been, say, a trader, say a distributor of an FMCG company, it is following blindly whatever tax rate is being charged by these FMCG distributors. So this can pose a lot of risk for the trader also as such, because when the FMCG company is caught up in this litigation issues, most likely even the trader will be affected by this. Another drawback is that these FMCG companies will be able to hire the best of lawyers, and those kind of things will be there at their disposal. But the trader as such will be very badly affected when these kind of disputes come across. So it is not always advisable that you follow the rate at which your purchase invoice, the HSN code which is followed by the suppliers. You also have to undertake an independent study of the HSN code. And if there is a different code, you need to bring it to the notice of your supplier and tell him this is the wrong code being charged by them. But as such, till there is no dispute, there is no issue in the case of the trader, because you can continue paying taxes if it's the same rate of tax.
Madam, Rupesh Pai asked 3 questions, madam.
Sorry, who, sir?
Rupesh Pai privately asked me 3 questions. One, how a photo of a god made of gold will be classified? That is first one.
Is it there in the chat box, sir?
It says he
yes, I got it. Yeah, I got it. How a photo of God made of gold will be classified. For this, again, you need to look at the section notes, chapter notes. There is a particular chapter dedicated to precious metals and precious stones. You will have to look at the section notes and the chapter notes over there and see whether this frame of a photo made of God could be classified over there or not. Whether these kind of articles are also being classified over there. Figures of deities, whether it has to be classified as articles of gold or as articles of, say if it is a printing industry, for the example which I gave you, then you have to see over there. But in my view, since this photo is made of God, which is made of gold itself, okay, so the figure of the deity is made out of a precious metal itself. In my view, it will be still classified as an article of gold only. So again, subject to reading the section notes and the chapter notes. How a cotton and woolen shirt with same proportion of both materials will be classified. Yes, Mr. Rupesh, that is what I've given you the example to say that certain times these rules fail and you have to come all the way to rule 3C to ultimately find out where your classification will be done. So in that example which I gave you, rule 3C said that you find out which is the last in the numerical order. And you find out the classification in the case of cotton fabric, woolen fabric. In this case, we'll go by the one which is coming last in the numerical order.
Third one.
How microshield hand rub having antibacterial functions and used by surgeons to sanitize their hands before surgery. Will it be classified as surgical products or something else? Again, we look at the terms used in the section notes, chapter notes, whether the term surgical products has been defined itself or not, based on that. In fact, even the sanitizers, given the current situation, sanitizers again has been a great matter of dispute as to whether it is to be considered as a medicament, whether it is to be considered as a soap, whether it is to be considered as a disinfectant itself. So finally, there had been some clarification by the authorities in Hyderabad, wherein the circular was brought out saying that it will be classified as a disinfectant only with a tax rate of 18%. That was again based upon an opinion by the World Customs Organization, where this dispute, even the World Customs Organization had faced, and they had clarified that it will be classified as a disinfectant. How to classify reimbursement of expenses, sharing of expenses. This again, Prashanti, will depend upon what is the principal supply. You have to see whether the conditions of pure agent are being met. That is, valuation rules will have to be dealt with in detail to see how this classification of reimbursement has to be done. In my view, it has to be classified along with the principal supply itself. Is there any other questions, sir? If you could just help me, please.
Yeah, there is a question from Jayaraman M. Nowadays, people put up programs in YouTube. The advertisement income received by the program runner will be liable to service tax under which service? Maybe GST under which service? This is in the question and answer sessions. The question from Jayaraman.
Okay, I'm not able to find this. Mr. Jayaraman, if you could just repost it again, maybe it will come down.
And the Q&A, madam. Q&A.
That is the question and answer session.
Okay.
In the chat. Question and answer.
Q&A.
Okay, sorry, I got it. I just opened. When?
Yeah, there are two chat boxes.
Yeah, just a minute.
Question is this, madam. Nowadays, people are putting program in YouTube and they get advertisement income. So under which head it will be taxed under GST? That is the question.
So, are you asking this question from the viewpoint of the person conducting the YouTube video,
Who's
who's
income?
earning the advertisement revenue? Because when the advertisement is being conducted at the time of the program, the advertisement revenue as such goes to the YouTube only. It does not come to the person who's conducting a program. So in that case, classification will be dealt as an advertisement service only.
Pooja Somani, another question is there, madam. Is classification question of law or question of fact?
It's a question of law or is it a question of fact? It will be a question of fact, sir, because what is actually being done, how the product actually is being manufactured. That is why I said a lot of information has to be taken from your client before you even open your first schedule to customs tariff act. You have to equip yourself with enough knowledge on the product in terms of technical literature, where the product is being manufactured, how is it being sold, what is the marketing strategies, all that has to be taken into consideration. And then you have to decide on classification.
There is one more question.
Yes, sir.
From Geshman Dandanala. What will happen if any supplier took wrong classification and charged a lower rate of tax in purchase invoice. And if there is there any liability in the hands of the buyer, or if department is dispute later the classification of supplier.
So now when your purchase invoice is having a lower rate of tax, you don't have an option but to just pay whatever tax is being collected from you from the face of the invoice. Now when your supplier lands into a problem and they say that no, the supplier was using a wrong rate of tax and the excess tax has to now be borne by the supplier. You as such being a recipient of such supply will not have any, you will not be affected by this at all because what was demanded from you was being actually paid. The classification, if it is wrongly done by the supplier, it is the supplier's responsibility to pay the additional tax. Now it will be a different case where the supplier will try to issue a debit note for you to collect the balance incidence of tax. Now all this again is subject to the statutory time limits which is being mentioned in the GST law. So if such kind of a debit note, maybe you can say that you are now going to pay up this extra amount of tax because at the time when the invoice was raised, the tax charge has been already paid. So in my view, the buyer as such will not face any issue if the supplier lands into a trouble. But if this buyer is going to be a reseller of this product, then you need to check up because the whole chain might be get affected and the department will be after all the persons who this particular supplier has sold to. And then you also might receive a show cause notice disputing on the classification. So do not blindly follow what the big companies are actually following. Do your independent study also.
Now, how do we classify bundled products which are of same nature and have similar usage? For example, pressure cooker and tawa pan. This is a question from Ridesh Soni.
Yeah. Now, bundled products, we need to see what is the definition of bundled products. Again, it has to be naturally bundled in the course of ordinary business, is what they are saying. When these similar usage products are being bundled and sold, you need to go by the classification of the most essential character. Which product is giving it the most essential character that you have to see. In fact, in my example, in your example which you have given of pressure cooker and tawa pan, I will say that though the goal is ultimately used of cooking, the functions are different. They are going to be differently used. One is not going to support the other. Recall the example of the hair clipper example I gave you, which had the comb and the scissors attached along with it, sold along with it. Now, all those are going to do the same function of hair cutting. But over here, you see tawa and pan is going to be used separately and pressure cookers are going to be used separately. So in my view, these are not a bundled product itself as such. It will come under a mixed supply is what is my understanding on this product.
Okay, now the Girish Shah, preparing and selling statues of different personality, where to be classified?
Now you have to again determine what will be the nature, what is the ingredient, the raw material being used to manufacture these statues. Where are these statues going to be used? That in fact you have to look at the section notes and the chapter notes to see whether these kind of figures are covered under that or not. Articles of stone, articles of cement. Under that chapter, you may look into, read the section notes, chapter notes and see there is, I'm sure there is a classification for these statues also.
How to treat the classification of transportation of goods?
Miss Beena Begum, this is again a very open question, madam. You have to tell me specifically what are you asking about. Now, transportation of goods, like we know, we have to see whether it is being covered under the definition of a GTA, wherein they say a consignment note which is being issued by a GTA, then it becomes a GTA. Then the GTA has the option of either paying under forward charge or passing on the responsibility to pay tax under reverse charge to the recipient of such supply. So all these aspects will have to be seen. What is the nature of document being issued? What is the ultimate responsibility of the transporter? And whether the invoice is being issued saying that the tax has to be paid under reverse charge, then all those aspects will be able to take into consideration to final transportation. But if I am a dealer in goods and along with goods, if I'm even providing transportation services for which I'm again charging a small amount towards our transportation charges, Then it becomes a composite supply where the principal supply is supplying the main product of mine, which is the goods, and transportation becomes an ancillary. And this, in fact, is a definition, an example given in the GST law itself.
In the chat box, there is one question, madam. It can be the final question. In the
Okay,
chat
so,
box.
tell me the name, sir.
Sanal TT, last.
I have
When,
last is Miss Veena Begum's question.
it's a chat box. It is when a
That
wellness.
is in Q&A.
Sorry, chat. Fine, got it.
Yours?
Yes, yes.
When a wellness Ayurvedic treatment is provided in a premises of the service provider, such that even that diet is decided by the provider, do we treat the Ayurvedic treatment in nil category or as a resort? Since it is a lump sum package including food, stay, treatment, medicine. In my view, madam, even I had a similar case where I had to decide on what will be the classification of such kind of these resorts where they provide Ayurvedic wellness treatments, Ayurvedic massages are being provided, but it is in a resort, it's like in a holiday kind of a setup. So in this, you will have to see whether the definition of healthcare services is being met. The healthcare services definition is given in notification 12/2017 by way of an explanation. If this is covered under that healthcare services definition, then services provided in relation to healthcare services will become exempted. So that is the aspect which you will need to check whether it will be covered under healthcare services or not, and also whether the person who is giving this treatment, whether he is technically qualified to provide or prescribe such kind of treatments. That will also have to be done. Whether these treatments are provided based on certain medicinal documents, medicinal books, the scriptures of Ayurvedic texts and all that, whether it is in line with those kind of schools of medicine, then maybe you can consider an exemption. But otherwise, you'll have to take a very cautious call if you're going to go in for an exemption for these kind of services.
I think with this we will conclude. I think, madam, you are already very exhausted. 3 hours continuous class you are taking. I think
Thank you so much, sir.
everyone appreciated. I think I feel so. There are many
Thank
comments
you.
in the chat box. It's a wonderful presentation, and
Thank
you beautifully covered it. I
But
don't
if
know how to
anyone who
thank-
requires any further help, sir, they could write to me and I'll be able to assist them in finding
Yes.
out this classification. The email again, phone number is shared in my presentation.
Oh, and madam, Ranam Branch is really thankful to you.